Well, hello, and welcome back to that thing we like to call Curless Mania, where we talk all things pop, rock, and prog. Today, we are here to talk about XTC, but before we do that, I'd like to welcome back to the channel. It's been a minute since he's been on the channel. I'm very happy he's back, Mr. Todd Evans. How are you, Todd?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Tom. I am really looking forward to this one.
This is
Something I've always wanted to do.
Yes, and this is very unique because it's a actually a viewer comment that inspired this video because we Todd and I did a an album study of Skylarking, and you can check it out. It's in the videos in my on my channel, and check it out. And I think we mentioned this during the video. Somehow we were, sometimes these things can get a little, we talk about the band and we talk about other albums, and this comes up. And I think somehow we mentioned these two records, and we said something about, man, we could, if we combine those two albums or something like that, it would be an amazing record. And then somebody in the comments said, you guys have to do that video, like do the video where you're combining Apple Venus. This is the promo copy, Apple Venus Volume 1, and the last two XTC records, and this is Wasp Star. So the last two XTC records, which were released in 1999 and 2000, and we had mentioned these albums, and we had said that, man, maybe we could combine these two records to make just this monstrous, awesome record.
And
And
a
so
lot of people sometimes people get mad when you do that. Like there's all of this controversy about like editing the White Album, the Beatles' White Album, into a single disc, and people get very defensive. They're like, no, you can't. Don't you dare.
it's
But
like messing with history or something.
I
Like,
feel
allowed
like
to do
this
that.
one should not be as quite as controversial.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be as controversial. I think that, and to me, I think it's fun. It's really fun for me because it's almost like playing producer. Like if you,
Yeah.
I would say, if you were with the producer of these sessions, and you were given like carte blanche, you were the Todd Rundgren from Skylarking. You're the guy who's making the calls. You can say, here's the track listing. I think these songs are stronger, and this should be the record. And you're
Yeah.
or A&R guy, right? Whatever you want to call it, A&R guy from the label, where you're saying like, this is, I think you guys should do this. And honestly, I just said to Todd before we started this, and I just want to get it on the table right now before we even go into anything further. And that is, I'm glad that all these songs exist. I think all of them are strong. I love XTC. I'm a massive XTC fan, and I do like all of these songs. So this was actually a very, very, very difficult task for me because I still feel like even the songs, if we do leave some of these songs off, there should be like an EP,
Yeah.
like I don't
For the
know,
rest of them. Yeah.
should be an EP later or something, but because I would want them to exist, but
Yeah, well, Dave Gregory wanted to do this. He pushed for this to be one record.
oh, did he? Okay,
So yeah. Yeah.
okay. Well, so let's get into that. Before we dig into the song lists, let's dig into a little bit of, since you mentioned Dave Gregory. It's Dave Gregory left the band before these albums were released. He was no longer, he was part of these sessions, but he was no longer in the band when these albums were officially released. There's many, 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 many reasons for that. I think there's a ton, and he goes, I don't know if you've seen that. There's an interview with him that goes pretty deep into the reasons. And I think it's on Cherry Red TV, and he
Hmm.
does an interview. And have you seen that?
I haven't. I've heard about it. And I think that there are some quotes from that in the wiki article. But yeah, I've heard of it. I need to go watch that.
Yes, yes. So basically, the long story, let's try to make this short, but the long story short is that XTC had a terrible deal with Virgin. They weren't getting paid well enough, apparently. And they had made the deal when they got signed originally, and they never renegotiated it. So it was just this old, crappy contract that they did with their old manager, who was long fired by this point. And
Mhm.
they never renegotiated. And they were doing fairly well with the albums like Skylarking and Oranges and Lemons. They were doing better in the States, and things were going better for them. And they realized they weren't getting paid. They were getting like paid a pittance for everything that they were doing for their albums and songs and publishing and all that. So Anyway, they ended up, long story short, they ended up going on strike. So they just said, look, we're not going to do, if you're not going to give us a, they went to Virgin and said, give us a better deal. And they said, I think they said no. And they said, well, if you're not going to give us a better deal, then we're not doing anything. We're putting down our tools and we're just going on strike.
Yeah, and there's some specific things too that got Andy Partridge really worked up. There was supposed to be a third single off of Nonesuch for Wrapped in Gray, and it got canceled. And he was upset about that. And then he pitched their the next album as XTC. He had this idea to do this like bubblegum pop thing, and he pitched it, and he pitched some of the songs, and they didn't like it, and had a bad reaction to it, and so he was just in general not happy.
Yes, yes. And his other crazy idea was Dukes of Stratosphere, right? I mean, he went to them with Dukes of Stratosphere and they were all excited about it because they were all, as he said they were all old hippies at Virgin. So they were all like, oh, yeah, an old psychedelic band. That would be great. Let's do that. So they were excited about his other idea. So then
Yeah,
his second idea he comes in with, they're like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. No bubblegum rock band. I don't know what you're talking about. What's not happening.
right.
Yeah, so he was very upset about that, and that kind of, I think you brought those up. Those were two really hot button issues for him that he just was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done with Virgin. That's enough of that. And so he got angry and they decided to go on strike. But I'm not sure that Dave Gregory ever really wanted to go on strike. I think he was like, what are we doing? You know?
Yeah, I mean, he had a lot of issues. He wanted it to all be done at the same time. He didn't think that he was a good enough keyboardist to do what Andy was asking him to do for this project. He at one point he asked him to write a chart for a 40-piece orchestra, and Dave turned in a cheaper arrangement for four players, and he was like, no, that's rejected. And one there's a quote, Dave Gregory quotes Andy Partridge saying, compromise equals crap art, and
Yeah.
that really kind of pissed him off. And
Yeah.
he felt like he was waiting around for them to finish this really ambitious project for him to be able to play. And uh, I think that it would have been better if there hadn't been this extra issue of them not having any money. They didn't
Yes.
have any
Yes.
money. They
Yep.
couldn't afford to be in a proper studio. They started in Chris Difford's home studio, and then they left because Colin Moulding said the studio is not fully functioning. And then they had to restart, and then they did uh, they when they hired, and this is a really cool thing. This is kind of goes back to the skylarking thing. Andy Partridge spent so much time talking about his relationship with Todd Rundgren, and not getting along. But one thing that he took from that whole situation was trying to use Prairie Prince to record drum tracks any every chance he could. So they signed Prairie Prince for this album, signed him up for this album, and Prairie Prince was like, "Oh, it's clear that they don't have the funds to record this record." And
Yes. Yes.
so all of that's very interesting. The string arrangements were recorded in one day at Abbey Road, and it's just like that's amazing. I don't know how they did that
That's
because
incredible. Yeah.
it is really incredible. They finished the album, and they finished the album in Colin Moulding's shed, uh,
Right.
and
Exactly.
so
Money was gone at that point.
who would
Yeah.
know when you listen to this? We're talking about Volume One here. When you listen to this elegant thing
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
had so much trouble and that they were so broke. So
Yeah.
I think if they weren't in that situation, that the situation with Dave Gregory would have been not quite so volatile, because they would have been like, okay, well, just if you don't like this one, just hang tight. You can contribute more to the next one. But he was
Right.
probably like, I don't even know if there is even going to be a next one.
Yes, yes, and he really felt. I mean, you're right. They had gotten some money from this label called Pony Canyon or something,
Mhm.
from a Japanese label or something like that, fronted them money to start the record, and they had it. And he says in the interview, we had enough to make a pretty good record. So it was interesting. He didn't say really good. He said pretty good.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. It may not have been enough really for what they were used to from Version, right? So anyway, so yeah, so he was already like, and then he kept saying to Andy, "Okay, the money's frittering away. Like the money's going away, man. Are you paying attention? Like we don't have that
Yeah.
much money for this album. What are you doing?" you know.
Yeah. And Dave was like, this is not the album that we should be making right now. We've been gone for 6 years and this is not what we
Yes,
should be
yes,
doing. And
exactly.
that's one of
Right,
those things. Two things make me think, Dave's not wrong about some of this stuff.
right.
That's the first thing. The second thing is that he refused to sign the American distribution contract with TVT because
Yes.
he talked to some friends and they were like, dude, you're not going to get paid if you sign that. And so he probably wasn't wrong about that either.
He wasn't. He wasn't. Yeah, the musician, he said, I barely got it out of my mouth, and they said, "You will not be paid."
Right.
So you're right. He wasn't wrong about that. So there's a lot of things
Yeah.
that he had valid points on, and he was starting to push back on Andy pretty hard about these things. And I think that Andy was like, "Look, man, you're just all you're doing. From Andy's standpoint, he's just complaining all the time. Like, just stop
Yeah.
complaining. You're driving me nuts." And then also, according to Dave, that he was getting kind of like to your point about the orchestrations, which he had done brilliantly on Skylarking, by the way. He did like a thousand
Right.
umbrellas and all.
Right.
It sounded great to me, but apparently Andy was more into like the total huge orchestra thing. Like that's what I want to do, and Dave, they were kind of keeping Dave sort of at like harm's length, like he wasn't contributing enough, and that was annoying him too. So there was a lot of reasons, right? And they finally apparently came to blows in the studio. There was like this huge shouting match that happened. He said in front of everybody, and he said it just never after that, never things were never the same. So there
Yeah.
you go. There you go. So anyway, we're getting really deep in the weeds here, but it's good to know these things because these sessions were not smooth. They were pretty volatile sessions, and they went on for years. Obviously, I think that some of these songs were old from like right after
92 to
time such.
94.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and Andy had done these sophisticated demos because by this point he had a pretty decent studio in his backyard or in his shed or whatever. So he was doing these sort of sophisticated demos too that were pretty close to being almost releasable songs. That was a different thing too. So anyway, so that's the background. That's just kind of a short background. And we are here again to talk about these two records and combining these two records into one. So taking these two albums and making them one. Like Todd said, I don't know if you said this earlier off air or on air, but he was talking about what you'd say the White Album. Yeah, you
Yeah.
mentioned it earlier. It's kind of like that where you're like, oh, the White Album could be a single album that would be amazing, right? But then it wouldn't be the White Album. So there's probably a lot of people are going to say that, like, well, then
Right.
the albums wouldn't be the same. But of
Right.
course, but this is just for fun, right, people? This is just for fun. So anyway, Todd, so when you started this process, well, first of all, before you do give your list, do you when was the first time you heard these records and were you pretty impressed by them generally? Like, were you waiting for these albums to come out?
Yeah, and I was living in California at the time with my first wife, Gail. She should watch this because she loves XTC. And that's who I was with when all this was happening, and I'll tag her so maybe she can watch it. Hi, Gail, if you're watching. She
All
never
right.
watches these, but anyway, we're still friends. But
Okay.
uh, but so we loved Apple Venus Part One.
Mhm.
By the time Apple Venus Part Two came around, I was a little bit I was a little bit disenchanted with it. I felt like I was hoping it was going to be better.
Mhm.
And it's interesting that one of the things that this exercise did for me was make me appreciate it more. I
Mhm.
always had kind of over the years, I've had this opinion that the first one is a lot better than the second one. And that's why I had this real uh, uh, feeling that they should have been one because I felt like, both of them are very good, especially the first one, but they're both kind of disappointing in a way. Not because the material's not strong, but it's just like neither one of them gives you what you're used to getting. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
like when you think about like oranges and lemons and none such and skylarking, you think, oh, it just goes all over the place. It's here and it's there. It's rock and it's chamber music and it's
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get so much
And these
and you
kitchen
think,
sink
okay,
productions, these kitchen sink
yeah, I
songs.
don't want it separated. I
Right.
want it to bounce back and forth. And
Yeah.
so my feelings about it was that what was that the fir- my if I was to narrow it down to fewer words, I would say I felt like the first one needed drums, and I felt like the second one needed uh, magic, like it needed
Right.
melodic content.
Right.
And
Right. Yes.
that's how I always felt about them. And my opinion has changed just a little bit. Now I kind of think of of the first album as being closer to kind of a masterpiece, and I think of the second album as being a much stronger album than I did at the time.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. And
So it
that
was kind of a long answer, but
no, but that's great. That can and that's what I love doing this because that can happen when you kind of dig back in after years of not listening to an album. You go, oh, wait a minute, this is stronger than I remember. Or
yeah,
maybe your mindset's different, or you're going in with kind of lowered. You're going in with the lowered expectation this time, like, oh, it's not this
right,
one's not that good, and then you're like, oh, wait, it is pretty good actually.
yeah,
You know. So, but I think you're right. I think the general consensus, because I kind of felt that way, and I think a lot of people that I knew liked XTC felt kind of similar. That oh yeah, the second one's a little bit of a letdown after the first one. That's what the general consensus was at the time. So, but I'm not sure about that. Like you said, the more I listen to these albums, I go, I'm not positive about that. If that's an accurate assessment. So,
yeah.
uh,
I
yeah,
wanted to say too that this is something that I've always had a really strong feeling about this, and I want to say it in case I forget. I do not like the art. I do not think that it's a good idea for a band to not put their name and have a logo for the project and the name of the album on the cover. And I feel like if he wanted to use, he was felt strongly about using these images, and I understand why he used them, but I don't like that, when you got the CDs, the name was like in the clear part of the spine that kind of went up the side, but
right.
it doesn't, in the streaming world, it doesn't give you any information. And
Yes,
I
this
don't,
is
yeah.
what you mean on the side, the clear
This
side.
is the Ape Records
Yes.
redo, and it looks
Oh,
like,
nice.
but I actually like the way the first one looks better. But the cover art on this one is more colorful. But
Okay. Okay. That's I may have to get this because this is the
the
original.
back of it looks like this. It's very nice.
Oh, nice. See, I think it's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because mine's the original TVT, and it's I love all the
Yeah, I
ape.
used to have that one.
Oof, all the ape reissues are so good.
Yeah, they are. They're
Well
very, very
done.
good.
Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, so what let's let's get
Okay.
into the task at hand. Why don't you do you want to go through your list first? You want
Yeah.
to do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I wanted to we were talking about doing sequencing, and that's always been like a dream job for me. I remember seeing an interview with Mike Portnoy and him saying that that was since he's not really a writer, he writes some lyrics, but that his strength is sequencing. And so when it's whether it's Neil Morse Band or Dream Theater, that's his job. He's the man that picks the song order. And I'm like, man, I'd love to have that job.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's
Because
important.
I'm also not a songwriter, but I love doing stuff like this.
Yeah,
So what I
yeah.
wanted to do was I wanted to kind of keep some things about the sequencing that Andy Partridge did.
Hmm.
So with that in mind, my the first track on I have 14 tracks,
Okay.
1 hour and 8 minutes. It's longer than I wanted it to be. I wanted to push it to more like 50, but I
Right.
couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. Couldn't. I understand. I
So I've
understand.
got 14 tracks. My first one is River of Orchids, which
Okay.
is what starts the volume one album. I think that it's experimental in nature, and I think that it's a good kickoff. I couldn't think of a better way to start the album, and it kind of reminds me. It's got this rhythmic thing that's very complex. It kind of reminds me of Wake Up from Big Express, and so
Yes. Yes.
that's one of the reasons I wanted to keep it. It can, by the time you get 4 or 5 minutes into it, it's a little bit abrasive,
Yeah.
but so when I did the sequencing, the next one I picked was We're All Light from Volume Two because I think that that is a real you know, I tried to put a Colin Moulding song in position two because they tended to do that. They,
Yes.
start with
Yes.
a start with an
Yes.
Andy and put a Colin in position two. But I just couldn't do that, and we'll talk more about why as I get in and talk about what I picked and what I left off.
Okay.
But I thought We're All Light was a real nice transition from River of Orchids, and then after that, my number three is Nights in Shining Karma, followed by Frivolous Tonight.
Okay.
and that is part, that comes those two songs together come from the original track listing. Well, no, no, they don't actually. Do they? Hang on, let me look at my I don't remember. Do you have the album in front of
Yes.
you? I think
Which
that's right. I think those two are together.
which one, I'm
But
sorry, which ones again?
Nights and Shining Karma and
Karma.
Frivolous Tonight are my three and four.
Um let's
Do I
see.
have that right?
Lights and Shining Karma. Yes, you're right. You're
Okay,
absolutely right.
that's
Those
what I
are,
thought. I
yes.
don't have a physical copy of the first one, so I
Yes, you're
didn't
right.
want I
Those are
didn't want to get lost in my multiple windows on my computer.
yeah.
But
Yes.
Frivolous Tonight is the only song that I chose of Collins.
Okay.
And I don't like that because what I was going for was was a typical Colin usually has, like 3 out of 10 or four
Hmm.
out of 12 or
Right.
something like that. And
Right.
so I was trying to do that, but I really don't think that his input to these albums, I don't think it's his best work. There are XTC albums where I pick his song as the best. I think King for a
Right.
Day is the best song on Oranges and Lemons.
Oh,
So that's
love King for a
not to
Day.
slight him. I think that he's very, very, very good. But in this particular case, when we talked about doing this project, there was one track where we'll talk about it later, but I was just like, oh, that's got to go.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's
And
part of
I love
Collins,
Runaways. Runaways is another. Oh,
unfortunately. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
there's lots of good
Yeah.
examples of that.
Mhm.
So anyway, Frivolous Tonight is number four. In the number five position, I put Church of Women.
Okay.
I feel like that song has kind of a prominent position on the Volume 2 album, and
Hmm.
I don't know if it quite lives up to that, but I feel like, just kind of in the middle of side one that it works a little better.
Hmm.
And then I followed that with I'm the Man Who Murdered Love,
Okay.
which if I had to pick a favorite song off Volume 2, I would probably pick We're All Light, but I'm the Man Who Murdered Love would be a very, very, very close second.
Yes.
Uh, and it kind of, putting that song before the one that's about to come next is a way to kind of pull the album a little bit closer to being a pop rock project rather than, a really ambitious or orchestral project. And
Hmm.
then position seven, is that right? One, two, three, four, five, six, seven is, and I consider this to be, I put this in this position for a reason. It's Green Man.
Okay.
And no matter how long we get, no matter how long it's been since we've crossed from the vinyl era to the CD era to the streaming era, there's always, to me, every album has the end of the first part and the beginning of the second part. And so
Right.
I always
Right.
envisioned Green Man as being in that position.
Okay.
Green Man and side one.
Okay. Gotcha. Got Green and ended side one.
Yeah,
Okay. Gotcha.
yeah, yeah. And so then I start track number eight, which would be the flip side if you're thinking about it as on vinyl as or a cassette, is Playground. And the reason I picked that was because it's the opening track to the Volume 2 album, and it kind of feels like an opener. So
Yeah.
in this case, it sits in the Earn Enough for Us spot.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's kind of what I had in mind. I was just like, you flip the album over and then this comes on. And I was like, oh, that seems logical.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
so so I follow Playground with Easter Theater.
Okay.
Uh, I'm covering up the track numbers and I'm having trouble remembering. Okay, so Easter Theater would be one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, ninth.
Okay.
And Easter Theater is probably my favorite piece on the Volume 1 album, and it always has been. It was when I first heard it, and it probably still is. Um, and then I follow Easter Theater with I Can't Own Her,
Okay.
which I think I almost kind of thought about cutting that one because I think that it's a little bit awkward lyrically. I like it, but I don't like that he feels like he has to put a disclaimer in the middle of it. Like when he says, "Oh,
He's
when I say I can't own her, I don't mean that I don't mean like buy her with money. I mean
right. Right.
And
Yeah.
I've always kind of felt like, you know what, Andy, I'm not really sure you need to put that
You don't
disclaimer
have to
there
say
because
that. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
know that you're not a misogynist, so
Right.
you could have probably left that out. But for some reason, that part I've always thought was awkward.
Yeah.
But I had to put it in there because I think it's the best string arrangement.
So,
All of the
so
string arrangements
majestic.
are
Yeah.
so good, but
Yeah.
that one is beautiful.
It is.
That one is really, really good.
Yeah.
And when he says the word swirling and it's the
Yeah.
orchestra kind of swirling,
Yes. Yes. Oh, so
really,
good.
really
So
well
good.
done.
Yeah.
Great attention to detail.
Yeah.
Then Harvest Festival follows I Can't Own Her.
Hmm.
It
Okay.
was another track that I thought, okay, that absolutely has to be, that
Yeah.
cannot be cut.
Right. Right.
And then I follow that with You and the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful, which is interesting.
Oh, interesting.
I thought
Interesting.
I thought of that as being that's always been one of my favorites, and it always reminds me of my probably my favorite song on Skylarking, which is The Man Who Sailed Around His Soul.
Okay.
Not that it's the same kind of song, but it has a similar kind of really great drum track. I
Hmm.
think that the rhythmic quality of that song is just fantastic. And I always thought it was Prairie Prince, but it's not. It's actually Chuck Sabo
Oh, okay. Wow.
singing.
I thought it was
But
pretty as well. So there you go.
yeah. So I put that one after Harvest Festival. And then in the number 13 spot, we're getting close to the end. I
Okay.
put The Last Balloon.
Okay.
Now, I really love The Last Balloon. I don't know if I like it as an album closer.
Right. Right.
I I like albums to close in a really big, majestic way, and
Hmm.
in that sense, The Last Balloon works as the closing uh, song from the Volume One, Apple Venus Volume One album. But I felt like there's another song that makes a better closer. So, I mean, there's so much great to say about The Last Balloon when that line when he says, "Drop us all like so much sand." And for years, I didn't even get that imagery of the symbolism of, when the balloon's leaving, you better be on it and
Yeah.
drop sand. And
And
I
they're
was just
waving
like,
goodbye as it's
yeah.
taking off. Yeah.
That's really good. But the song that I put in the last position, position 14, is The Wheel in the Maypole,
Okay.
which is the last song on the Volume 2 album. And this is a song that I always liked, but I always thought that maybe it's not a very strong album closer. But
Hmm.
in the past couple of weeks when I've been working on this, I really think it's a really great album closer. I love that it has two parts. I think that the transition between the first part and the wheel part and the maypole part, I just think is really well done. It's a complete style change and tempo change, and I think that's great. I feel like it's good to close the album because it has a lot of Colin Moulding presence. That part where he says, "Round goes the wheel." I love that.
Yeah.
And so,
Round goes the wheel.
yeah.
Yeah.
So um, uh so that yeah, that's my closer is the wheel and the maypole. So do you want me to run through it again without the
Yes.
gabbering in between? Okay.
Yes.
River of Orchids, We're All Light, Nights in Shining Karma, Frivolous Tonight, Church of Women, I'm the Man Who Murdered Love, Green Man, and then flip it over, side two. Playground, Easter Theater, I Can't Own Her, Harvest Festival, You and the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful, The Last Balloon, and The Wheel and the Maypole. And I wanted to say there's two songs. There's Church of Women and You and the Clouds Will Still Be Beautiful both have this thing where he kind of goes and it's very Black Sea.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
hadn't done that in a while.
Right.
It's just this rhythmic thing that he does with his voice, and I was like, oh, that's very Black Sea. But
Yes.
anyway, that's my lineup. 14 tracks.
Yes. The whole no matter what the weather, and he does the
Yeah.
It's hilarious. No, but it's interesting how you almost have like the fake close because it almost feels like Last Balloon is that long fade out, and that's going to be the last
Yes.
song. And then nope, it's not over yet. Like
Yep.
I kind of like that it comes back like energetic with
Every once in a while, I tend to be disappointed if there's an album that's got some really weighty, really beautiful, lush music on it, and they ended it in a way that's different from that.
right.
I tend to not like that, but I think XTC is the best at it. I mean, you think of of an album like Mummer that's almost pastoral in parts, and it ends with Funk Papa Roll, and it just works for some reason, even though it shouldn't.
It shouldn't at
So
all. It's
I
like the
kind of feel
heaviest
like they're really
song,
good at that.
the
And so when
heaviest
I
song
heard
by
Wheel in the
far.
Maypole, I was like, I got to use that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like it's the Funk Pop Rolls, the heaviest song by a long shot on that record, and it's the last one. It's just bizarre,
Yeah.
but it works. I agree with you. And at the end, when he goes bye, you know, um, kind of cool. Okay, well there you go. There's Todd's record. So what do you guys, was it 14 tracks?
Should we talk about what I dropped now, or do you want to do that after you give your record?
Yes. Why don't we do that? We'll talk about drop tracks after I go through my list.
After.
How about that?
Okay.
How about because we'll commiserate with about it.
Okay.
I'm sure we're gonna commiserate because my album's a little bit different. So, um, but we'll get into that. So okay, so my album, I kept it to 12 songs. So I had a couple rules for myself. I kept it to 12 songs, and I had to have at least minimum two Colin songs. So
Okay.
this is just like my rules. I just made these rules for myself.
I had that rule and I broke it.
You broke it. It's your album. You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. But this were just sort of made up rules in my head. So just to make it just to put a little bit of box around it, right? Because so anyway, so here we go. It's a 12, and I also, this is another episode. We got to do this someday because this is something that's been in my head for a while. Is that the whole the what I call the abusing of the CD, where it's like this album could be great if it was 12 songs, and it's like 14. It's
It's like
15 songs.
17.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you're like, what the? This album could be a great 12-song album, like. Or even taking like three songs off of it would be like a stronger album, you know?
Yeah. I think about that a lot. There are a lot of albums that are more than 14 songs I'd be like, "Oh, I would cut
Yeah.
4."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that the only reason I was okay with putting 14 is because I think None Such has 17.
That's
Oh,
true. That's true. Nonsuch is a long
I was
record.
like,
It
mine's
is.
still shorter.
Yeah, no, Nonsuch is long. I agree with you. And that is that for me again. Nonsuch could be an album where you could do a little trimming. That's just
Mhm.
me. I love Nonsuch. I think it's
Me
very
too.
good. But there's a couple. It seems like it kind of by the end you're getting like okay, some of these songs. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But another album that I was thinking of, I always think of, is Rush, Snakes and Arrows. I think that album could be killer if it was like
It
11
needs
or
to be
12
9
songs.
songs.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's funny that you say that because you jumped in because I think there's a lot of great stuff on that album, but there's a couple where you're like, oh, this couldn't, like, this could be so good if it came out in 1981 or something and they made it a 10 song.
Clockwork Angels too, if you want to really rile up some people in
Yes.
the comments.
Yeah. Anyway, I love both those albums, so let's not
Me
get crazy.
too.
Anyway, so all right, so my 12-song record, here we go. I'm kicking it off with Playground because you said it earlier. It kind of has that opening track feel to it. It's got that big riff. I'm going to start with some rock because we've been waiting 7 years for this album. Let's hear some guitar. So I love Playground. I think it's a great, very deceptively, and there's a lot of that on this record. They're sort of deceptively simple. It seems simple, but it's really not. By the time you get to the end of it, you're like, okay, there's a lot of arrangement, tricky stuff going on. So I really like Playground, and I love the lyric of, you might leave school, but it never leaves you, kind of thing.
Yeah,
You know, it's
me
just
too.
life is kind of the same. It's just you're not in school anymore, but the same things happen. There's still bullies. There's still the girl you like that doesn't like you.
Yeah.
There's all these things that still happen. It's just different.
Careful what you say, gonna make you pay. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the lyric a lot. So
Yeah.
I'm going to start with Playground, then it's going to go into this to two spot is going to be I'd Like That. Which I'm not sure, was that on your list? I don't think it
It
was.
was not, and it was originally was, and I cut it.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going with that in the two spot. I really enjoy this sort of McCartney-esque kind of like almost feels like where he's hitting his knees and playing acoustic, and it almost feels like
Yeah.
I don't know, like I Will or something. I
Yeah.
really like, I kind of
Nice.
like that song. And I've always thought it was very hooky, the whole I'd like that if we could. And that's another thing about these albums is that there's a lot of lyrically, there's a lot of like there's a lot of darkness and there's a lot of light because he went through a lot of things. He went through a divorce and then he met somebody else. So there's all of this like, oh my God, I can't oh my this is horrible and this is a train wreck. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I really love you and we let's get together. And it's like you're like, what's going on here? But it's just because it's two different relationships. But
Right.
um so anyway, so speaking of that, the next track is Your Dictionary, which is probably the darkest song on both of these records, where this is post divorce and he's kind of feeling a little bit bitter about it, I guess. And he said himself that he had written this song and kind of felt like, okay, that was that I feel better now. That was good. I kind of got that off my chest, but I'm not going to release that song. Like that's just my bile coming out, kind of my meanness coming out. But I don't want the world to see that. And I guess his friends heard it and they were like, "Oh my God, that song's great. You gotta release that song."
It keeps happening to Andy, doesn't it? That happened to Dear
Yes.
God too.
Dear God, the same thing exactly. So yeah, so Your Dictionary, I think it's a great song. I love it. Good in the three spot. Then the first Collins song, In Another Life, which I don't think you picked this one, but I love In Another Life. I think it's very good. I agree with you that Collins not on his A game as much on these two records, but I do like this song a lot, and it kind of gets me here. Like if you've been married for any amount of time and you hear the lyrics to this song, it kind of gets you because it talks about like compromise and if you'll take my bad habits, I'll take yours, and you can have your cigarettes and I can have my shed, and I can and it's a
Mhm.
lot of like kind of give and take in a long relationship that does start to happen, and it's
Yeah.
well I love that.
I tried very, very, very hard to include that and was not happy with myself that I cut it because I that would have been my second Collins song, and it's my second favorite of
Yes.
his
Yes.
songs. So yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of going for this like Noel Coward, like kind of old school kind of vibe, and it kind of works on this song. Like it doesn't work on other ones, but it works on this one for me. So, but anyway, I really enjoy it. So that's In Another Life, and then followed by Easter Theater, which I believe was on your list as well. That's just such a,
Mhm.
I mean, you can't leave that song off. It's so good. It's a killer Andy track. Love it. And then kind of staying in the same mode is and finishing out side one is Nights in Shining Karma. Kind of a strange side closer, but it's got kind of a vibe to it. And
No, I can see that. Yeah.
yeah, so I kind of I just liked it as a side closer. I enjoy it. And then so it's turning over to side two. We're starting out with Stupidly Happy, which again, very, very sort of like when it starts out, you're like, is this really an XTC song? It's just so basic, right? It's just that ding, 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 and just continues. But as it goes on, and he's adding layers and layers and layers, and when he does that whole thing of all the birds in the trees, da, 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 and it's just like, oh my God! I just by the end of it, I'm like, I love this song. I love it. So I'm sold. I love that. So I like it as a side opener. Then it goes kind of, we're switching gears into the Harvest Festival is the second track on side two. As you said, just a phenomenal track. I just love the whole, that longing look you gave me, or he's talking about a girl looking at him across the pew. And I remember that like when you were a certain age, like 12 or 13 or something, and some girl, you kind of have like, even just a look to get, that seemed flirty was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
kind of like throw you sideways a little bit. So I sort of remember that. I love that. And I just love it. I just think that the melody is that longing look you gave me. Do, 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 do. I mean, that's just, I just love that
Yeah.
melody. Oh, so good. Anyway, so then goes into Man Who Murdered Love, which I love. Just, I think it's just such a great, straightforward track. And, and I just again the lyrics are so good. I keep talking about lyrics, but I just love some of the lyrics on these albums. Where he's talking about how like what does he say? I put a bullet in his sugar head. What is it?
Yeah.
I put
Yeah,
a
that's
bullet
what he
in his
said.
sugar head, and then he laid down, and then he thanked me kindly, and he laid down dead. And and then roses came out where he bled. I just love that. I think it's so great.
It is funny that he says he starts out the song with by saying, "Hey, what do you think of that?" Like
Yeah,
he's done
yeah,
us a favor.
yes,
Like,
exactly.
you're welcome.
Yeah, what do you think of that? Yeah, exactly. Um, so, and also a little shameless plug. I did a version of this song that actually got like a bunch
Oh,
of, it got a bunch of view or got a bunch of plays on Spotify because these songs are not on Spotify, and they wanted to put this song on a playlist, and it got on some playlist, and it got all these plays.
oh wow. I
Yeah,
didn't realize that.
yeah, because I was invited to do an XTC cover, to be on a cover compilation, and I did that song, and it got on a Spotify playlist. Anyway, so but it's really a fun song. I love the song. Then next is another Collins song, "Frivolous Tonight," which you put on your list, I believe, as well. I do love again. This is his kind of take on. I just love he's talking about trivial things, and he said that he was going for this as a writer. He was trying to do songs that are about everyday things and just very normal things. And "Frivolous Tonight" is kind of gets me a little bit because it's the whole, we're just going to talk about trivial things and it's going to be fun. Like we're going to talk about husbands' hairy backs, and we're going to talk about, we're going to gossip, and it's going to be fun. You know what I mean? And
And
just
once you know that, his songs make a little more sense
yes,
in,
yes.
in this project.
Yes, he's not going for these big songs. He's going for little songs almost. And it's kind of interesting. And sometimes it's really succeeds. So I think it succeeds on this one. And then it goes into "I Can't Own Her," which we talked about. Oh my God, this song gives me chills. Because when he talks about, I mean, you're right. The middle section is a little awkward. I agree with you. It's kind of a strange middle eight, but that whole "I can't own her" and it's a bitter pill, and to your point, the orchestration behind it is just so phenomenal. That do do do, that, and it's a bitter pill, and it's just, oh man, just it's so good. Um,
Probably the best he ever sounded vocally.
yeah, yeah.
These two albums, I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah, he sings really well on these
Yeah.
songs. Yeah, I agree. Very, very good. I can't own her is like you said. It's the whole property thing. I can't, but I think I can understand where he's coming from. Where it's like everyone's got free will, right? And even if you want someone to love you, they don't have to.
Well,
It-
and it's from the perspective of a wealthy man. He talks about all the things that he does own, and
yes,
so that kind of sets it up.
yes, exactly. But love is not property. You can't own a person. So yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it kind of reminds me of like certain, what is it? What was it? I want to say is it Scarface where he really loves Michelle. Is it Michelle Pfeiffer? Is it?
Oh,
I
I don't
don't know.
know. I'm the wrong person to ask.
Yeah. Anyway, he's in love with this woman, and he just thinks because he's got so much money that she'll love him, and it's like that's not true. She doesn't.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of that. Anyway, so anyway, I'm getting way off track. So I'm gonna end the record with "Church of Women," uh,
Okay.
which I love this track. I think it's kind of a slow burn track, and
It is.
and it's just I don't know. I just whenever I hear it, I always go, oh yeah, I really love this track. I want to worship at the Church of Women. It's so funny because he's so all over the place. Like one minute he's deriding women, and then the next minute he's like he wants to worship at the Church of Women. So
Uh-huh.
he's all over the place. But I think it's kind of the idea that men can't really survive without women. Like they want to try to act like they can, but that women they need women in their lives. I mean, I don't know, something to that effect. But anyway, I love it. I think it's a good way to close the record. But so yeah, there it is. I'm not going to get into songs I left off. I'm going to say that's my 12 song album. So there it
I
is.
wrote it down because I want to make a playlist. So yeah, I like that. I like that. I'm a little jealous that yours is two tracks shorter than mine.
But it
I
was
really tried.
it was no, but we're going to get into how hard this was though. Very,
Right.
very hard. So can you want me to say what was hard for me? Should I
Yeah,
start?
yeah, yeah.
So you can see on I have last balloon over here. You can't see it.
Uh-huh.
And then I've got "We're All Light." I just leaving those two off. There's my 14 song album. I mean that it was so hard to leave those off.
Yeah, the hardest ones for me to leave off were In Another Life and Your Dictionary.
Yeah, yeah.
That broke my heart a little.
Yeah. See, the people, do you understand people? We're going through pain doing this
But
episode.
but I actually understood. I actually kind of dropped your dictionary because for the same reason that Andy didn't think it was for public consumption was
Yeah.
that it's
Yeah.
so it's really harsh.
So personal.
So
So
that's
personal.
great, but it's also maybe too much. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. It almost feels like you're eavesdropping on something you shouldn't be or something like
Yeah.
that. Like it's
Yeah.
almost too much. Yeah. So that's interesting. Yeah.
But
No,
it hurt. I didn't want to cut that one.
yeah. Yeah. No, believe me. We're All Light killed me because I think that song is so, I just love it. I love it. I love the bounciness of it and
Yeah.
it's so different for XTC. And then Last Balloon, like you said, the whole like you can drop us all, and then when it does that long fade at the end, and his vocal turns into like a instrument.
Turns into the flugelhorn. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
Really
love that.
nice.
That part is just like phenomenal. So it's so hard to leave that off the album.
I almost cut it. I almost cut it because I thought, if the point of this is to make a project that's a little bit more accessible, then that would be one of the ones that you would drop. But at the end of the day, I just couldn't.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but to your point about Colin, I mean, Boarded Up would not even get it close to making the record for me.
No, I cut Fruit Nut, and
Fruit Nut.
from the very moment that we talked about doing this, I was like, well, that's out.
Yeah, yeah.
It is an example of him talking about trivial stuff.
Right,
But to
right.
me, that is not even B-side material to me.
Tandem
Yeah,
fruit. Got to have a
got to
hobby.
have a hobby. Yeah, oh,
Not into that. And to me, Boarded Up to me is like I don't two
yeah.
by boarded up.
Boarded Up is hard to get through. I cut Stupidly Happy, although I kind of like that, but I sort of always knew I was going to cut it.
Yeah,
My Brown Guitar and Boarded
yeah,
Up, I think, are both not up to par.
no,
I don't like Standing In for Joe. I sort of like Wounded Horse, but not a lot.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's kind of what I
yeah.
cut. I'd like that was in my original list, and I cut it.
What was Wounded
I'd
Horse?
like that
Oh, I'd love
was
that.
in
Got
my
it.
yeah.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
initially going to be on my side one, and I
yeah.
pushed it out.
Yeah, no, the same thing. Standing In for Joe's okay, but it just not to me. It's like it's not as good as it could
Yeah.
be. And then Wounded Horse, I just it's okay. It's kind of like, again, it's to your point about dictionary. It's kind of like very, very, very personal. Like I was like a wounded horse after the divorce kind of thing.
It's very personal and it's very meat and potatoes
Yeah.
rock song. It's
Yes.
very
Yes. It's very XTC-ish.
if you wanted to do that to show that you could, like if he wanted to put a song like that in an XTC album because people think that he's so, oh, you're always writing all these fancy, complicated songs. Like I could
Right.
see him, that may be why he did it that way. It was because, we'll take this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And then My Brown Guitar is, it's okay. It's
It's all right.
all right. I mean, we
I
could
considered
say
putting it on,
every
but
day,
I
yeah. It's okay. I did, but ultimately I knew it wasn't gonna. So, like I said, these are songs I knew weren't gonna make the cut. And then it did kind of pain me to not to put River of Orchids on as well because I do love that. But it's just I don't know. I don't know why. I just felt like it's sort of it's very very eclectic. It's like that sort of really super eclectic XTC.
Yeah, if they hadn't started a couple albums in that way, I wouldn't have started this one that way. But I was just like, oh, it's something they like to do.
Yeah, and it still hurts me. It still hurt me to leave it off. I gotta say, it
Yeah,
did hurt. And then Green Man is very good too. I like Green Man. I just for some reason I just didn't. It didn't make the. It didn't work on my flow.
yeah,
And then like you said, Fruit Nut. No thanks. No. Um, yeah. So I mean, really, Apple Venus Volume One was pretty well represented for both of us, actually.
yeah. I had 8 songs from that and 6 from Volume 2.
Yeah. Yep. Which I think most, again, I think that would be, I mean, who knows? I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't speak for the general public. Who knows? Somebody might come in and be like, oh my God, I love volume two, you know? Um, and some people could say like, oh, I love Standing In for Joe. It's a great track. Who knows?
Right,
So
right. I don't think that there aren't very many that if I would say Fruit Nut, Boarded Up, and that really might be the only ones that I would say I think are weak.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think that I'd have to just stop with just those two.
Those are B-side material.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those could be bonus tracks.
Yeah.
So so yeah, there you go. So there's my album. I didn't read it back in sequence. So Playground, I'd like that. Your Dictionary, In Another Life, Easter Theater, Nights in Shining Karma. That's side one. Side two, Stupidly Happy, Harvest Festival, Man Who Murdered Love, Frivolous Tonight, I Can't Own Her, and then ends with Church and Women.
And just in case, just to get ahead of this in the comments, we both are aware that this will not fit on a one slab of vinyl.
Exactly.
Think of it as a cassette.
Yes, it's a cassette. Yeah, or I mean, it's you're right because it's. I was thinking that too. I'm like, there's no way this would work on a vinyl. There's maybe we could have made it really hard and been like it's got to fit on a record. Like, oof.
Well, and following XTC through the whole switch over to the CD era, you've got Skylarking, which is a single album, but it's got a lot of tracks on it. And then they go into Oranges and Lemons, which was a double. And then
Yeah,
you go into None Such, which didn't come out on vinyl initially. And that's even longer.
could
So
be
None Such is
double.
a
Yeah,
double too.
yeah,
And so
yeah.
now that it's, been released on vinyl, that might even be a triple. I don't know. I don't have that. I
I
don't,
don't have that one on vinyl, but
yeah.
I should buy it. I mean, I really don't know why I don't have it
Every
because
time I picked it up, it was like $45, and I always put it back down.
exactly. I'm the same
One of
way.
these days, I'm gonna have to get it. People can tell us in the comments whether that's a double or a triple. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's long. It's a long album for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, there you have it, folks. There it is. What do you guys think? Let us know. I mean, let us know what you think. Give us your lists. What would your list be?
Yeah, and put them in a if you've got a lot of time, put
Mhm.
them both in two playlists and play them through and let us know which one you think is the best.
Yeah, exactly. We should make this into a competition. I'm gonna win this one.
And
No,
then tell us why we're wrong.
yes, I think it's mostly going to be like, oh, you guys are wrong. This is what it should be.
Right.
Which is fine. That's part of the discussion. That's totally fine, and that's what's fun about it. So, I just wanted to put a last plug in for this book, this Song Stories book. If you're familiar with this at all,
Oh yeah, I used to have that.
Yeah, Neville Farmer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
just basically just writes down his interviews with them, and yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I just have in my head that I've used in whenever we've had discussions about XTC. There's another book, I think it's called Chalk Hills and Children. I'm not totally sure of that, but it's another like a history book, and that's where I have a lot of my recollections of of Andy and Todd meeting and the initial experience with how the skylarking uh, session started. A lot of that comes from those books. So yeah.
yeah, it's this what's really interesting about this book is that they interview him. It's interviewed about song. They talk about specific songs,
Mhm.
and these albums are being made while this is being written. So they're like, oh, and here's some new songs. Then these are going to be on the upcoming album. So it's interesting that it hasn't even been released yet. But it's interesting. I was going to read this one real quick. The I Can't Own Her um, description is because we were talking about this. Is like your dictionary, Andy wrote, I can't own her, but didn't want to record it. There you go. Here it is again.
Uh-huh.
The rest of the band outvoted him, and Hayden Bendel, who's the producer, especially determined to include it, although changing it from the loungy nature of the demo to include orchestral sounds, guitar feedback, and possibly Celtic harp. It's a bit too honest, said Andy, cringing. I think it's about both the women in my life, one coming and one going. Not that I wanted to own them, but there's a desperation about losing somebody. And in some ways, I didn't want to lose the one that was leaving. And in another way, I didn't want to ever lose the one that was coming. It's a desperate, raw little emotional song. So there you go.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I just thought it was very interesting because I think we were pretty close to what it was getting at. So
Yeah, yeah. And you've reminded me to order that book if it's still available. I think it is.
yes, it's very good. If you're a fan, it's excellent because they just like the whole career. They do the whole career. So it's and like every song. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, that's if you're still with us, we really appreciate it. You must be a big XTC fan. So thanks for sticking around with us, and thanks for
Yeah,
putting
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for putting up with us with our lists. And Todd, thank you so much as always. I appreciate it. You did a great job. Thank you.
Blast. Thanks.
Yeah. And I also have to say, like and subscribe if you like what you're seeing, because it really does help the channel. I appreciate it. It doesn't take a minute to just hit that subscribe button. So, and we will see you next time on Curless Mania. Take care.
See you, everybody.